Hey everybody, welcome to our uh, live stream. I'm really excited about this conversation. My name is Bobby Amar. I am the founder of TLB Club, or Thought Leadership Brand Club, which is basically a membership community designed to help small business owners level up their brand voice, their digital platforms, to work on their programs, their funnels, their sales, their marketing, their speaking, whatever they're trying to do to build their business. We also focus on leadership development for any leaders that are trying to grow and get better at what they're doing. So that's what the club is all about. And today we're going to have a really powerful conversation about something that's really important to me, which is healthy tech for families. I say parentrepreneurs, but it's basically parents, entrepreneurs, and families and kids, whether they're young kids or teens. And I've brought today some really amazing experts to share knowledge with me, and I'm very excited to have them here. So it's going to be a really awesome conversation. So if you are here and you're watching this conversation right now, feel free to chat in the chat box. Put a comment in the comments. Let us know where you're from. Where you come from: North America, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia. Probably not Australia, but you're probably sleeping. But if you are there and you have comments to share or questions for the panel, you can totally ask those questions. I'm going to start by actually just doing some introductions. So let's go to you, Andrea. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about you and your story and what you're doing, and then we'll move it to Emily as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Davis. I am the founder of Better Screen Time, which I started in 2018. I'm also the mother of 5. My oldest is 20 and my youngest is 10, 4 girls and 1 boy. I live in Oregon in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. And my background is in teaching and secondary ed. And as technology started to become more and more invasive and our family was pretty low tech, we were the family that kept our TV in the closet. I was grappling with trying to decide and understand how to manage technology with my own family. So I decided to put my background to use in teaching parents and helping families to worry less about tech and connect more with their kids. That's really my goal.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea. Emily, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, my name's Emily Churkin. I'm known as the Screen Time Consultant. I'm just north of Andrea, up in Seattle, in the other corner of the Pacific Northwest. So it's nice to have coastal friends. I was also a teacher. I taught 7th grade English for 12 years. And during that time, really witnessed a change, both from my experience as a teacher, being asked to use technology as a teacher, and also my students' use and access to smartphones and social media. And so I feel like I really witnessed this seismic shift from almost no tech to almost all tech in my students. And so now I work as a speaker, consultant, and advocate for reducing tech use, particularly in the school environment. But I also wrote a book called The Screen Time Solution about helping parents navigate screen use at home.
Awesome. And again, Thought Leadership Brand Club is about featuring thought leaders. So I see Andrea and Emily as thought leaders in this space. I'd like to be a thought leader in the space of screen time and tech. What's interesting about me, though, is I'll give you a little my background. So my name is Bobby, as you all know. I've been a motivational speaker for 20 years. Over the last 20 years, I've delivered keynotes and workshops across 4 continents, mostly in the area of leadership development, personal branding, storytelling. But I also became a social media guy. 500,000 followers on Twitter, a LinkedIn top voice, 70,000 there, 40,000 Instagram, and I built on every single platform. I'm a TEDx coach to help people land a TEDx talk to elevate their brand, and I also run the TLB Club, which is a membership community. So I've been a speaker for the most of my life, but and I love social media, and I loved how it amplified my message. I loved how it helped amplify my business. But what's interesting is that even though I am a very strong advocate for social media, I've also bore the brunt of the challenges of it, whether it's burnout, addiction, cyberbullying, toxicity. Particularly, I started on Twitter, but I've seen it across Facebook, Instagram, and on LinkedIn. It doesn't end. It's everywhere. And so, the reason why this thing is really important to me, this conversation, is because there's 2 things that kind of drive who I am personally. One is the technology piece, and the other one actually is like health. I've struggled with my weight for many years. I'm diabetic. I'm type 2 diabetic. I've had body image issues for a long time. And so with the kids, I wanted to make sure we didn't have those issues. So I looked at all the data and I saw everything was going on. And then I became one of those, 10, 20% of parents that decided to not have sugar in the house. Like no cookies, no donuts, no sugar cereals, nothing. I explained to the kids with labeling, here's what it is, here's how much sugar you eat per day, here's what I do. Now, has it helped? A little bit, not totally. Like, I think my daughter is definitely a sugar fanatic, but it's important for me to talk about that. And particularly because I think it's a long-term thing and I don't want them to go through what I went through. And then similarly for, when it comes to technology, same thing. I saw the data around social media and tech addiction, and myself even included, having struggled with it, and then turning off my notification things I did. And I realized with the kids, I think it's an important piece. And I became, and I'm not sure what the number is, but I think I'm one of the 0.01% of parents who basically said to our kids, we're not going to get you smartphones. I made that decision when we were very little. I got support of my wife. I think she's mostly on board, but we made that decision and we told them when they were little, and we basically talked about the data and how bad it is for everything. And so they have flip phones, which still has its own issues, but they don't have smartphones. And they're now 14 and 16, grade 11 and grade 9. They are, my son in particular is the only person in his entire school that does not have a smartphone. He's mostly handled pretty well. I think my daughter has really struggled with this. It's not like we ban them from things. Like we give them access to their laptops. They have a flip phone. We give them access to our phones. If my kids do Snap, so I let them Snap, but on my phone for 10, 15 minutes, and then I take my phone back. And that's kind of what I've done. And it's been a really difficult decision, and it feels very, very lonely. And every parent I talk to, or among my friends, they all get very defensive. I go, well, we had this, and I understand there's certain instances where you need it. Like for a perfect example would be like divorced parents, and they have to, co-parent. And I understand the need to have a device. Although I would argue you could do that with flip phone too. But I digress. But I made that choice, and so that's why. And there's lots of reasons behind that. And so I want to kind of get into it. And that's why I brought these two here to talk about it. So what I want to start with actually is, when was the moment each of you knew that there's something weird or odd about this and you decided maybe we should do something? So I'll start with you, Emily, and then we'll go to Andrea.
Well, it's interesting because as much as I work with parents, the first aha moment for me was actually as a teacher, because I was first asked to start uploading grades and assignments into like a portal. And this was back in 2012, 2013. This is over a decade ago. And what I noticed was students, well, a couple of things. They stopped coming to talk to me to ask about, well, why is my assignment missing? Or what grade did I get on this? Or how do I improve my essay writing? And they started going to the portal. And then because our parents had access to the portal, the parents started emailing me instead of me talking to the kids. And so what I noticed was just suddenly this triangulation of responsibility and this displacement of skills that I thought was absolutely critical to the 7th grade experience, that executive function. And so, I started talking to my students about it, and we were, they were also starting to get into early social media, which of course was like Facebook back in the day. And they would say things like, well, it's not just us that are on Facebook, and this is still at this point on home devices. Most of these kids didn't have their own personal devices yet. And they were like, yeah, well, Emily, our parents are texting and driving. Our parents are on Facebook. Our parents are playing Candy Crush. And I was like, oh, wait, this isn't a kid problem. This is an adult problem that's impacting children. And I have to do something with adults because this isn't kids' fault. And so that was where I really had that aha moment. And it took a few more years and a few other experiences to step into what I'm doing now. But that was a very formative experience. And that was over 10 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. How about you, Andrea?
Yeah, my experience was 8 years ago, and it came in the form as a parent. And our oldest was 12 years old at the time. We had recently moved across the country to a place where we didn't know anyone. And my oldest child is the ultimate oldest child, like the kind of kid that cleans her room without being asked. And so the smartphone seemed like a great tool for her to keep in touch with friends that she left behind, and for us to stay in touch with her in a place where we didn't know anyone. And I'll never forget her coming home from school one day, and she sat down to have her after school snack. She had her bowl of cereal, and she was spooning her cereal into her mouth like this with one hand, and then she was doing this with the other.
Wow.
And not talking to me, just scrolling on the phone. And it was this realization of, where did my kid go? And where did those conversations go that we used to have after school of, how was your day? And, what happened today? And I had a few other unfortunate events after that where I realized that we had given her too much too soon. And as responsible as she was, this was a really powerful tool that we had not prepared her for, nor was it really ever intended for kids. Big tech didn't have kids in mind when they were building it. But so we went back to a brick phone. It was really painful for all of us, but it was one of the best decisions I made. And so I realized that I needed to share that message with other parents so they could avoid that mistake, but also so they could have hope and understand that they could change their mind and take a step back if they needed to.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I think that, for me personally, I've noticed it throughout the years. I remember when the kids were babies and they would take they would read a magazine and they'd try to scroll across like it was an iPad. I was like, wow, that's interesting.
Wow.
But actually, I've seen it for many years. So I used to do a program for youth, grade 10, 11, 12, many years ago. And this is back when people just started having their flip phones at the time. And what I noticed was, because I started noticing teens, because they were so used to just short messaging, they were having trouble having deeper, longer conversations about stuff. Everything had to be kind of a short message. And I started noticing that's kind of, and we started talking amongst the staff. It's kind of weird. Like, have you noticed that? Like, yeah, you ask a deeper question and they just want to keep it short. They don't really want to dive deep into it. And I found that to be, and that's back in like 2005, 2009. That's kind of where I noticed that kind of switch. And at the time, that program, we banned phones, and parents would freak out. I'm like, no, if you can call us. We have phones. We will get, if you need to get in touch with your kids, no problem. Whether it's a school or whether it's a program, like we have access to them, so it's fine. Plus we send kids to, programs where they're gone for like the entire week or two without any sort of technology, and you can only write them letters or you call the office if there's an issue, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the biggest story I can tell you is that it was my daughter's 11th birthday. And she, at this point, some of her friends many of her friends, not all, but many of her friends have smartphones. And she had this birthday party where she wanted to show a movie, and we were going to have a cake and dinner, and then she went to sleepover. And what ended up happening was, two of her best friends showed up, and they both had their phones. And what ended up happening was, everyone was on the sofa watching TV and watching this show, the movie she wanted to show everybody. But two of them, one had an iPad out, one had her phone out, and they were just there scrolling and laughing and watching videos. And she got really mad. She told them, hey guys, please put that stuff down, come and watch this. And then I interviewed. I said, okay, can you please put this away? Like, Ryan wants to show you the movie. So then, so we're doing that, and then one of them still has her phone, just not even paying attention to the movie, whatever. And my daughter was really upset. She's 11th. This was her 11th birthday at the time. And then one of the girls wanted me to charge her phone. I'm like, I kind of wanted to say no, but I was like, fine, I'll charge it for you, whatever, and you can charge it. Later that night, they had the sleepover, and this is where it got really kind of crazy. The two friends who were sleeping over were two of her best friends. And at a certain point, they were sleeping in the office, our little office, and my daughter came to us in the bedroom. She's like, they're on their phones, and I feel left out. I said, okay, let's go. I said, you know what? Just ask them to stop, and then we'll come by in 10 minutes. So 10 minutes went by. We went back into the room, and they were still on their phones. And we asked the girls, please, we'll take your phones now. And they really hesitated. One girl gave us her phone, and then the other one refused. And we said, okay, well, look, so fine, we won't take it. Just put it over there. Just put it over there so that you guys can hang. Because you want to spend time telling stories, telling jokes, whatever you want to do, and not ignoring each other. Yeah. And it was really kind of tragic. And then they had to sleep over the next day at breakfast again. We're hanging out. Ryan wanted to show them something else, kind of fun on Netflix that she wanted to show them or something. They were on their phones. all the way. And then at breakfast, I'm like, guys, put your phones away. Let's have a pancake breakfast. I made them pancake blueberries for them. And it was just a struggle. And what I want to show you is this photo, because this photo is, I think, soul crushing. Okay. Hopefully it shows my.
Oh,
Yeah.
So this is my daughter, her two friends on their phones, and she's really, really bored. And it was just so sad that I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. We need to change something with this. And so at that point, I was like, you know what? We need to do something about this. And that's kind of where I became more of an advocate and activist. Not like you guys, but that's kind of what I was kind of talking about. So yeah, so that's kind of where I come from. And again, if you're listening to this live stream, please share your comments. If you have comments, we can share them. If you have questions for the panel, please do. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. So just put your comments or quotes in the questions, and there's people there who are commenting, and I'll share what people are saying. I think thanks, Kelly. Appreciate that. Yeah, because I think it's really important for us to know. So yeah, so let's go into. I kind of want to start with the adults. We're all adults. So Andrew, what do you struggle with when it comes to tech and screens?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges for me is trying to maintain and run a social media account and telling people to get off their screen.
Right.
So, so luckily, I created some boundaries from the very beginning of starting Better Screen Time because I knew they would be necessary. And in many ways, they've saved me, but it still takes constant effort. So a couple of those is one, I just decided I wouldn't use social media on Sunday. And for us, that's like a family church day. And so I wanted to just be able to focus on that, on my family on Sunday. And so that's something that I've stuck to and that's been really helpful. And then, I always take sabbaticals. I'll call them social media sabbaticals. And I've done them for months at a time, which is kind of a scary thing when you're running your own social media account and you are running a business and trying to reach people, but it's definitely been helpful for me. But I think one of the biggest challenges that I face is when I do take those breaks is really hard for me to get back on and get back into the swing of social media simply because of the comparison factor. And I think we all have our different ways, things that we struggle with social media and tech. For whatever reason, for me, that's a really hard one because the things that I really love actually aren't on social media. I really love being outdoors. I love adventuring. I love a lot of those things. But at the same time, I really love the connections that I've made on social media. I love the people that I've met. You and Emily, and I know Emily through a great organization that we're both a part of called Fair Play, who, is a whole bunch of advocates. But there are so many amazing people that I've met through social media, and I love that. But I would say the comparison on social media is a really hard thing for me. So I don't know, for you guys, what's hard? I'd be curious.
Second that.
What about you?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's one of those things where I have to constantly remind myself that we are all on the same team, those of us who are really advocating for change and for protecting childhood. And it isn't about how many followers people have. And it isn't about did this video get enough likes? And yet it is, it's so hard not to be fixated. And I could get, 100 positive comments or DMs, and it's the one criticism or it's maybe not even a criticism. It's like a pushback. And that stays with me, and that disproportionate impact. And I'm 47 years old. And so I think about that all the time. If it affects me this much, and I have a fully formed prefrontal cortex, what is a child going to experience? We know their brains aren't fully developed until they're 25, 30 years old. So, to me, that just solidifies the reason for being really intentional and setting clear limits. And yeah, like Andrea, using it as a business tool. But again, I see us as consenting adults with fully formed brains. And there is something different about that versus handing it to our 13-year-olds or our 6-year-olds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And as Jay's saying that social media has been positive and negative, absolutely, it has been. I mean, I agree. Like for me, social media has elevated my career and amplified the awareness of who I am, and got me 5 TEDx talks and all the different things that I've been benefiting from it. But it definitely has its challenges. I think for me, the biggest challenge has been, well, I would say the kids. I mean, I certainly find that to be really hard. But I would say, for me, because I have a lot of influence, because I have a large reach out there, and because I'm very, uh, let's say, politically and social justice active, I get a lot of blowback, and I get a lot of
Yeah.
toxicity, I get a lot of bullying. And so when I take a stand on anything, it's hard. It's emotionally overwhelming. I mean, it first started on Facebook, and people started, and it's like, man, when like I got into an argument with somebody, one of my friends, and it negatively impacted me. And I couldn't believe it. We were good friends. We used to hang out with our kids, and I was like, man, I can't believe that I have to like maybe. And people are telling me, Bobby, you need to like set boundaries and shut this down. Like that person's really going after you. And so cyberbullying and toxic behaviors, whether it's in DMs or whether it's on comments, public comments, is something I find to be the most difficult. Because what happens is you get involved in a conversation like that, and then all of a sudden you're thinking about it outside of technology. You're going to sleep thinking about how to respond. Or what'll happen is I'll avoid going on social media for hours because I just don't want to see anything that they replied to or what they had to say.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's where I find it difficult. Now I do it though because the things I care about are important to me, and I'll still continue to do that. But I find that to be the hardest part of it. So
and you still have to show up to like be a good parent and so if you're getting this, and this is to Emily's point of like why our kids and teenagers would have a hard time handling social media, you just think about you getting one offhand comment or something negative and how much that disrupts your day. And so you think of like kids at school getting messages on their phones and like how could they concentrate when sitting in class or when they're dealing with so much negativity.
Yeah, and it's constant. They get way more than we do, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Let me ask you, are there any sort of data pieces or data points or evidence that, again, I've looked at lots of data and lots of evidence, but are there any particular ones that really strike you as really compelling? Because we're trying to convince people to better manage for themselves, better manage it for their kids. So are there any kind of compelling pieces of data that you want to share? Emily, let's start with you and then go to Andrea.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the parenting piece, and I know Andrea's all about this as well, is like what we do as parents is what our children are going to do. And so it's the modeling piece is a huge component. And I think that's one of the things I notice the most is like, there's a lot of for thee, but not for me kind of approach to the screen time challenge. And it's like, either parents want to set limits on their kids' screen time, but not their own, or they don't want to set limits because they feel like a hypocrite. And, the problem is the courageous part is the hardest part. And, like Andrea realizing we gave too much too soon for our daughter and being able to say we made a mistake and we're pulling back is a rare thing. And it's absolutely what needs to be happening. I think what I try to help parents see is that what gift are you giving your kids by not giving them a device? And the argument that we are fighting for their future cognitive, mental, emotional, spiritual, moral, physical health. And that is a fight worth having, I would argue. It doesn't make parenting easier. It is easier to hand over a phone or say yes. And even saying no doesn't mean they're not going to use it, right? Like, so it's both, and it's this constant conversations and the modeling. So that's not a data point, but there is evidence, there is research to back up the importance of modeling, is what I would say.
Yeah, and I'll add that to what Emily said. There was a study done within the past year that said the strongest indicator of how wisely basically a teenager uses a device is how well it's modeled in the home by their parent. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but essentially it was like teens that are able to learn to use devices wisely have parents who are modeling that for them. That's one of the strongest indicators of a use device.
And it requires the most work, which I think is the problem, is that we see technology as a quick fix for so many problems. but it isn't a quick fix for parenting. Parenting is hard. Parenting is laborious. Like, it requires conflict and resolution and communication. And, that tech displaces a lot of that.
Let me share a couple of data points for you. So 57% of Americans acknowledge being addicted to their smartphones. 44% of adults report feeling anxious when they don't have their phones with them. I felt that for sure. A systematic review found that 78% of studies reported negative impacts of social media on use of mental health, including increased depression and anxiety. There's sleep deprivation, sleep quality. 68% of young adults with smartphone addiction report poor sleep quality compared to 57% without addiction. There's also physical health concerns, eye strain, fatigue. There's behavioral patterns. One of the big things that challenges folks is doom scrolling, engaging in continuous consumption of negative news online, and increase the risk of serious mental health issues by 12 times. And these are all, and that's just the adults.
Right.
So you can imagine how hard it is for adults. Imagine how much harder it is for kids. We think kids can do this. They can't. One of my favorite AI tech screen experts, Amber Max, said this thing about technology for our kids, which was, you're basically putting a kid into a taxi driver and off they go. And you don't know who's driving. You don't know if they're wearing the seatbelt. You don't know how fast they're going. You don't know where they're going. And you don't know what the destination is going to be. And you're okay with that? Fine. They have this really cool tool, which is the car, but you have no idea where it's going. I found that to be a very fascinating analogy.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah, we know that teenagers get about 270 around their notifications per day, the average teen. And, studies say that it takes us about 23 minutes to refocus.
Yeah.
After we lose our concentration to refocus on a task. So you can only imagine if that's happening all day, 270 plus notifications. And then we're trying to and I mean, obviously it happens to all of us, but I think our teenagers are especially susceptible just because they are getting probably way more notifications than even adults are.
Yeah. And the Center for Disease, I think it was the CDC, found that 8 to 18-year-olds are averaging 7.5 hours a day on screen-based devices outside of school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that to me is how many hours in a day? Just do the math, and we know they're also using screens at school. So
in addition.
Yeah. And I like data, and I believe in using evidence-based research to support what we're saying. And I also think we can look around and we can see anecdotally and, just in our own homes or, going through a shopping center or looking at kids in a classroom and know that things are different. And that to me is yes, I want the research, but research takes time, and we don't have 10 years to wait for long-term harm to show up in the research. It's happening, and we're seeing it in the classrooms. I actually think there is a lot. It's funny to me. I get pushback a lot when I say things like, well, kindergartners are getting iPads in school. I've had people tell me, no, they're not. It's they literally are. There's literally iPads in classrooms from kindergarten through 12th grade, or Chromebooks, or whatever you want. And if you haven't had a child in school or been connected to a school in the last 5 years, and it's really the last 5 years, you have no idea how bad it's gotten. And I teach a university seminar, and my students who are in their 20s, I showed them a photo of all these kids on iPads in kindergarten, and they were horrified. And these are students who are only a few years removed from high school, and they had no idea. And I think, again, Andrea and I and all the other people doing this work are just trying to pull back the curtain and be wake up. There's a huge crisis, and it is going to affect business people. It is going to affect politics. It is going to affect healthcare. And we haven't seen the worst of it yet, in the sense of what it's doing to the destruction of critical thinking skills. So, that's what I lose sleep over at night.
Yeah. And I think one of our biggest pieces of evidence is actually talk to any young adult right now. So
yes,
someone who's 20, 21, 23, 24, and almost all of them will say, I wish my parents had had better rules or guidelines, which no guilt on the parents, because this is the generation that was all just thrown into it. Right. But, they wish that. And I regret it. I regret that I got a phone so early. I regret that I got social media so early. And to me, that's one of our biggest points of evidence is just talk to young adults and they will tell you.
I
Like
truly,
to me.
I truly hope my kids will maybe see when they're older that I'm not crazy, because I often feel like I'm crazy or they think I'm crazy. And I just hope they see that. Everyone, if you're watching this is our TLB Club live stream, monthly live stream. We feature thought leaders in different areas. And today we're talking about screen time, talking to screen time experts, screen time tech addiction for parents, kids, entrepreneurs. And the TLB Club is a membership community. If you want to check it out, click the QR code, see what it's all about. You can come to one of our regular Zoom calls, see some guest speakers come in. You can get access to our library of 200 master classes, as well as the community, to get focused and get support and not feel alone as an entrepreneur out there. So take a look at that and check that out. Next question I have for you is, so why is it so hard? Like, why is it so hard for parents to, I guess, get on board? I mean, obviously you're both advocating for this, but why is it so hard for parents to see this and to do something about it and to address it? Like, to me, it starts with the parents. I understand, like people always say, obviously governments can have policies. Like, I know that Australia passed a ban on social media for under 16, which I completely agree with. And I know that there's policymakers, but corporations I don't really trust to be in the best interest of our kids, even though they do announce stuff. Like I saw Roblox announce something. I'm like, that's great. It's several years too late.
Yeah.
And what else are you doing? Because
Exactly.
I don't think they care about profit. But to me, it starts with the parents. But you have to start them off young, right, and get them to understand that. So can you guys explain why it's so hard for parents to do this? That's the part I'm really trying to figure out and try to help parents really get it.
I have a feeling you'll say the same thing. Go ahead, Andrea.
Well, I'll share a few thoughts and then I'll be curious to hear what Emily has to say. I think one of them, truthfully, is time. Parents are truthfully really strapped for time. I think that we have a lot of expectations in our society today of what it takes financially to take care of our children. I think number one, it does take more than it used to, but I think also we have higher expectations of what we need. And so there is that demand on parents to, you've got two working parents and they're just trying to make ends meet, and our economy is, always uncertain. And so I think just getting the kids where they need to go and getting dinner on the table and all the things I think parents genuinely feel overwhelmed is part of it. And just, they also believe a myth that they feel like they have to understand all the tech to be able to lead their kids to what I call better screen time. But I always tell parents, like, that's a myth. You need a good relationship with your child. And then, yes, spend a little time at least doing some research. But I mean, just Google it, use tech to help you figure it out. It's all laid out there to kind of at least get some basics in place, and then just taking time to have these conversations with your kids. So I think that's part of it. And then I think the other part of it is guilt, where parents feel, I've already let the cat out of the bag, or I've already let the toothpaste out of the tube and I can't put it back in. And so I'm just going to roll with it. And we're going to just white knuckle our way through this and hope that my kid turns out okay. I don't know. I'm curious to hear what you think, Emily.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I actually think in my view, it's just not a fair fight, because you're talking about products that are designed to intentionally hook and hold our attention.
Right.
So persuasive design, manipulative design, those are sort of the words to describe it. It's much more well-known now than it used to be. But to me, that's what makes this an unfair fight. You don't struggle with your kids to stop reading a book in the same way that you struggle to get your kid off of a YouTube, binge. And so that's intentional. That's by design. And so this is where I feel very protective of those underdeveloped brains, because if you have children who are engaging with devices that are literally designed to just sort of fire bursts of dopamine and keep them scrolling, and of course, brains are amazing. They adapt. They need more dopamine the next time to get that same feel good hit. Then they're going to be even harder to get off that device. And, again, look at adult behavior. How many of us are doom scrolling at night? How many of us are, I'll just watch one more episode and it's a whole, 3 episodes later. So to me, it's just simply not a fair fight. It isn't a parent versus a child. It's a parent versus a hijacked neural pathway. And you will never be more compelling, passionate, right than a dopamine hit. And so to me that, it's like, yes, this is parents' responsibility and it's not our fault, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's the design that makes us much harder for parents. And so to Andrea's point, like if parents are trying to deal with all the other struggles of being a parent, to also fight the dopamine feedback loop is just another impossible task. And so you're never going to feel successful at it. And then I think you feel alone and ashamed and embarrassed and guilty. And that, often prevents us from seeking support or talking to each other about how hard it is. So yeah, that's kind of where I see it, is just, it's those hijacked neural pathways.
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this too. So, and I've thought about this for years. But you make a really good point. There's lots of variables, and that's what makes it so overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
But I also believe that parenting is work, and whether you try to, give them good food and give them good opportunities, you have to put that effort in. I remember years ago, we decided to do a no tech weekend with the kids because they were already addicted to the tech when they were like 5 and 7. It was crazy. And so we decided, let's just stop have technology on the weekends. It's just nuts. We don't need it. There's so little. And what happened was, it was absolutely horrible that weekend. Next weekend, absolutely horrible. And how horrible was it? You have to have patience. You have to have endurance. You have to persevere. It was horrible for 5 straight weekends in a row. But on the 6th weekend, I can report that my wife and I were not bothered by anybody. We woke up and my son was playing with blocks. My daughter was drawing. And I was like, holy cow. Okay, we got somewhere.
I love that.
So, but you have to have that patience to endure and go through that stuff. So exactly. when you do, say the toothpaste is open, well, there's ways to go back. You just have to be rigid, consistent, and eventually you get there. But I'll tell you that I think that, to me, there's a couple of big issues. So one is, I think most people don't know the data. They don't really, maybe they don't want to know it, but they don't actually read it or think about it. And that's why it's so important for us to share the data. That's why I'm sharing the data, because I want people to realize the data is really bad for adults. It's far worse for kids. They also don't know what you pointed out about their brain development and how that all works, and how they're not designed to handle these things. And then I think that the technology, as you said, is very, very difficult. The other thing that I would bring up is the reason why it's so hard is because, just like the sugar thing that I mentioned, another example I'll give you is the environment. A lot of people are like, why don't people do so much better on climate change and climate impact? It's because climate change and climate impact, and even the sugar diet, healthy eating type thing, and the screen time addiction, managing thing, is what we call a long-term play. Because it's something that impacts and happens over a course of 5, 10, 20, or in climate change, let's say 50 years, we're like, well, if one day it's terrible, not a big deal. If 1 week we're bad, or 1 month not bad, whatever, or that was a bad year for us, but we're gonna get back on track. And that's not how it works. I mean, it's very cumulative with climate and with sugar too. Like if we didn't get that on track, then what happens is the kids see that sugar is fine and drinking Coca-Cola is fine and all the things that, but now they're not. I mean, we did our best. Our son not a big sugar guy, which is great. Our daughter definitely does sugar, but she's doing it outside the home. And that's fine. I'm not gonna all I can do is talk to her about it and encourage her, about the challenge and the data and whatever. And that's fine. But same with technology, we just talk to them about it, and you have those conversations, you share the data, but people don't want to do it because it's a long-term play. It's hard to think about the long-term impact in 10 years. And, seeing, and even with my kids now, I see already the impact of just having laptops, what the pandemic did to them. Even with flip phones, it's hard. It's still hard for them. And so I think people don't see that long-term piece about it. And so I still think it's up to the parents. I know you said, we shouldn't feel guilty, but I do blame a lot of parents for what they're doing and what they could be doing better. I think a lot of times we just have excuses.
Yeah.
And so for example, like, because it starts at the baby level. You see people in restaurants and the baby has an iPad and they're staring at it for like,
Yeah.
30 minutes. I think that's terrible. And not that I'm going to say anything, but like, there's other ways to entertain your kids, and it's hard to go for dinner, and maybe you don't go for dinner every day. There's things you got to do. So for me, I think that long-term play is bad. The tech addiction aspect is terrible, and I think most people don't know the data. And I think those are the things that are really problematic. And then I think the last one I'll mention is, every time I bring it up, I can't even bring it up. It is very lonely. I bring it up, and all my close parent friends, they get all, well, they always say the two things, which is one is security, the other one is socialization. I just want to know where my baby is. I want to know what's going on and all that kind. I want to be able to access them, and they can access me and all that kind of stuff. And the other one is the socialization piece. So I would say, look, for the security thing, you can still give them a flip phone, they can still access you, but we trained our kids to ask a grown adult, ask the person in the store, ask the mom with kids if you can borrow their phone, if you need to contact us. And we've trained them. Like, we took them on transit, we showed them how to do things. And after 3 times, they said, do you feel comfortable doing this? Great. Okay, now you do it on your own. And now try to make them really autonomous, independent, all that kind of stuff. And then for the socialization piece, like we booked like, Zoom dates, we booked, FaceTime calls, we planned the socialization piece, because the 24/7 access thing is really horrible. They feel the need to respond right away to everything. And so those excuses of no time, those excuses of socialization, excuses of security, those are the 3 biggest excuses. There are ways to go around it, and you have to think about the long-term negative impact. And if you just look at the data, it's really, really concerning for all of us. And we haven't even talked about AI, right? In terms of, can they write from scratch something that they can communicate? But for me, so I mean, I know I'm throwing a lot of layers at you, but that's kind of where my head is at. I'm curious if you guys have any other thoughts beyond what we're talking about here. Any other thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Andrea.
I mean, I was just thinking back to an experience I had when I was very first diving into this, like, 8 years ago or whatever. And I remember talking to a mom of a teenage girl, and she said, I can always tell when my daughter has been in her room, on her phone, on Instagram, because she comes out of her room just totally depressed, doesn't want to talk to anyone. She's moody, she's irritable. And so kind of back to our point about just the anecdotal data, from the beginning, I could just see more and more parents would tell me this. And I'm like, yeah, we did. I mean, now we do have a lot more data than we did years ago, but it's been here all along. And if you just take the time to talk to other parents, if you have younger kids, talk to parents with teens or with young adults and ask them, like, how did they manage technology and what regrets do they have? Because I can guarantee you every parent has regrets, and learn from that. Because just like you're saying, Bobby, like, we have to play that long-term game. And I look at my kids, and I love when we can go to, like, my husband's orchestra concert, and they take a notebook and paper, and they can totally be entertained. Even my son, who's like, he's going to be 14 this year, and he still doesn't have a phone, and he can entertain himself with, like, drawing and just little games on pen and paper with his sister. And I'm like, that's the gift that keeps on giving. Once we give that gift to our kids of being able to entertain themselves and being able to have conversation with someone. And it's so worth it if we just can, keep that long game in mind. So that was one thought that I had.
Yeah. And I actually want to pick up on something I think you were saying earlier, Bobby, about the, that young people, or maybe Andrea, maybe it was you, about young people being concerned. You ask them, I asked my college students, like, how many of you had Chromebooks in high school, and they raise their hand. And then it's like, how many of you have a Chromebook today or would buy one? And no one raised their hand, right? Like, that's maybe more about the quality of the device. But one story that really has struck me lately was I was talking to a group of 15, 16-year-olds, like high school sophomores, and they were saying, like, oh my gosh, we're so worried about the little kids. We're so worried about these 5-year-olds, walking around with TikTok and all of this access. And this one girl was saying that she worked at an after-school theater club, and the kids were, 6, 7, 8, and they were playing. And she said, okay, let's imagine we're flying. And the kids said, how? I don't know how. How do you imagine you're flying? Do you know how hard it is to drive creativity out of a young child? I mean, it's innate. They're born with the ability to imagine and pretend. And so, what have we done that we have somehow brought into the world devices that interfere with these innate qualities of being human? And there is evidence, there's plenty of data about highly creative people correlating with intelligence, and if we are knocking the creativity and the opportunity to build those skills out of children when they're young, I mean, it's a 5-alarm fire in my mind. And, to think about the long game also reminds me, I read about this in the book, about this idea of scary versus dangerous. I think too often parents are fixated on what is scary and ignoring what is dangerous. We think it is scary for our child to walk to school alone. Most situations, it's actually completely safe. I mean, the biggest threat is traffic safety because you're not paying attention because you're looking at your phone or your driver is distracted. But what is dangerous is giving a child an internet connected device to keep them safe while they walk to school, on which they can be contacted by complete strangers. They can encounter violence and pornography. Like, that's dangerous. And so parents really need to think about, when I'm giving this device or providing access, for whom am I giving it? Is it to alleviate my own anxiety? Is it to make me feel like the world is less scary? And Lenore Skenazy's work really goes into this, but what do we take away by constantly tracking our kids and being in contact 24/7? That's not actually good for children. So that's a series of thoughts that have come to my mind while we've been talking.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, we do appreciate the comments that are out there. And I actually want to mention one thing that kind of came up that I thought was interesting too. Where's the comment about the school? Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. So devices at school. The one thing I wanted to share was that so there's also what we call an equity issue too, which is if you're going to have devices at school, or I understand the need, if you have a classroom, you want to have give all the kids have a laptop. But let's say a teacher says, yeah, I'm really innovative. I want to have a poll, and everyone get out your smartphones. We're gonna do a little poll or Kahoot or whatever it might be. But then the ones that don't have them, whether it's because they have parents like me who've chosen not to do that, or they can't afford a smartphone, that's an equity issue, and they're left out. And yes. I think that's unfair. And I think that to me is also something that either they all have devices that are used. I mean, first off, you can do a ton of great teaching without devices. Yes. But I do understand why devices are easier. And I understand why you have PowerPoints and you have the presentation and you can use your laptop. So I'm fine with laptop usage in schools. I'm not fine with smartphone usage, because I think not everyone has a smartphone, but everyone's going to have probably a cheap laptop in the school, perhaps. So I think that equity issue is also something that comes up in a lot of different things. Another example of that equity issue or the access issue is I bought my kids tickets to this show concert, and now ticketing is you have to have a smartphone. You can't print up the ticket. And I called them. I said, "What's going on?" They're like, "No, sorry, we don't have it. You have to have this in your wallet or on your phone." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, but you have a show that's targeted to kids." Yes. And my kids don't have a smartphone. So what you're doing is making it difficult for us. I now have to go there and be there to drop them off. Yeah. I found that to be annoying. I understand for adults shows is different, but for the kids stuff, I was like, that to me, I don't like that at all, because you're changing the system and forcing us and also excluding people who don't have these things. And so I find that to be also a bit of a jarring trend.
I agree. And we are starting to see that in schools more and more, which is frustrating, because I try so much, to talk to our school district and say, please don't assume that every child has a smartphone. And it is an equity issue. So please consider that. And now, restaurants, a lot of times all have their menus on a QR code. And I'm like, I just want a paper menu, please. I don't want to look at my phone anymore.
It's
Yeah.
interesting too. There's also like when we talk about the equity issue because I hear a lot that the argument for giving kids computers in schools, like one-to-one devices, was about equity because certainly during COVID, if you provided I can understand from the school IT perspective, if you have a bunch of different kids on a bunch of different devices and managing all that is a nightmare. But the new digital divide, as it were, it used to be about access. The new digital divide is actually about time and how much low income and BIPOC students are spending on devices and on the internet and social media is disproportionately high. And, I think it gets easy to get muddied here too with the screens and school challenge. And I know Andrea and I are both aware of all this, but like there's the phones, that personal use of devices that children have and whether or not they should bring them to school. And I agree they shouldn't be in school. But then the secondary problem is the internet connected devices schools give. So, if kids are not bringing their phones to school, but they are still being given Chromebooks, they still have access to YouTube. They have ChatGPT on their school devices. They have internet browsers. And if you think that the, security controls and blocking software at the district is good enough to stop kids from accessing that, you're fooling yourself, because every single day we hear from parents that say, my kid found the workaround, my kid downloaded a VPN, whatever it is, kids are way savvier. And so this is where there's a lot of nuance in my view, is like, I believe we need computer labs. I believe children need to learn technology skills, but technology education is not the same as educational technology. A 5-year-old does not need an iPad to learn how to read. And a 12-year-old does not need a Chromebook to do research. And so, I actually really resist the notion that we need a one-to-one program, certainly K-5, I would argue K-8 and even K-12, depending on, the use of it, the internet connectivity, because there are some serious issues with it. And it's not just about efficacy. It's also about safety and legality too.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
Yes.
Okay, well, that was great. Again, we'd love for people to share comments or share some insights in the chat so I can feature them. Let's talk a bit about, there's a comment actually I see on Instagram. So, I mean, obviously, what someone said, I need to cut back on the amount of time our son is on screens. He loves it. I have put it in baseball and other activities, but he loves his online games. Any tips on weaning off screen time when they're so immersed and addicted to it? Andrea, I'll start with you and then with Emily.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the age on how you're going to handle this, because how I would handle this with a 5-year-old is very different than with a 16.
I think he's like 10 or 11. So
okay. Yeah. Well, at that point, as a parent, you still have a lot of authority, and it is a decision that you have to make as a parent, how much screen time feels appropriate in your home, and making a decision, like having that mindset. And then second, like really paying attention to their behavior in relation to the amount of time they're spending and also what programming they're watching or using. And so we know our kids are all different. As a mom of 5, I see that every day. And if you have a child who seems to react really poorly after like 30 minutes of screen time, then that's kind of your sign that might be an appropriate time limit for that child. Also paying attention to what are they doing on the screen, because maybe 30 minutes of a typing tutor versus, 30 minutes of Roblox or whatever it might be might create a very different response in your child. And so paying attention to, well, is this type of content that they're consuming or using, is this affecting them negatively? Is it affecting their behavior, their mood? So maybe we need to step away from that platform completely, or maybe we need to limit the time on that. And so for me, it always comes back to creating a family tech plan as a family and deciding where you'll use screens, when you'll use them, what you'll do on them, and how long, and writing that down and deciding ahead of time. And then as a parent, you have to be consistent, and you really have to stick with that. And just like to what Bobby said earlier, it's going to feel really hard at first. It's going to feel painful, not fun. But anytime someone has some kind of addiction or just a bad habit, you have to replace that with something else. So in addition to making that family tech plan, you need some kind of a plan of how this child's going to spend that time instead. And that doesn't mean that you as a parent has to constantly entertain them, but you can make a list together of boredom busters or whatnot, and make sure you fill your home with other activities and things that they can do. So that's my first thought.
Let me just add one quick thing before I go to Emily, which was we did a family tech plan, but then they were ignoring it. They weren't doing it. And I think that again, one of the challenges with parenting, and something that where I screwed up, is we didn't follow through on the consequence, or whether you set up as a consequence for not doing it, or you set up as a bonus for doing this. We didn't follow through on that, and so they realized, parents aren't serious, so we do whatever the hell they want, and so that became an issue where we had it all written down, everyone reviewed it, we signed it, everyone signed it, but then we didn't follow through it. So that you can make a plan, but if you don't follow the plan, or you don't adhere to the plan, then it becomes a big challenge.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. And the word that I use is tech intentional. And I actually trademarked it when I started using it. And it's proven very useful, because to me, like Andrea, a lot of it comes down to your values as a family and deciding how you want technology use in your family to reflect your family's values. And so to me, being tech intentional, my TLDR is less is more, later is better, relationships and skills before screens. And that's it. And trying to keep things as simple and clear as possible. But to your point, Bobby, that follow through and consistency is absolutely important. And I would just argue that for the question that was asked on Instagram, again, remembering that these games are designed to be addictive, they are designed to hook and hold attention, but each child is different. And so, one kid might be like, yeah, okay, I can do 30 minutes and turn it off without issues. And other kids can. And if you have a kid that just cannot do it, then they probably aren't ready to use it, and they need more brain development time. And that's an okay thing too. I think it's really important that we remember as parents, we are also allowed to say no and to stick to that. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to trying to deal with this situation, and I mean, there's so many epidemics, right? So climate change is an epidemic, and obesity is an epidemic, and this tech thing, you say it's an epidemic, and I would agree it is. It's just that no one believes it or sees it because they don't realize the long-term impact it's going to have. It's definitely going to have impact if you don't have the proper instruction and teaching people things. Even things like misinformation online. One of my biggest fears is that my son will watch some bros videos, and next thing you know, he's becoming part of some incel. Or with my daughter, the body image thing, I always worry about that too. And there's already lots of drama. So, it's hard. So in terms of your advocacy, in terms of dealing with this thing, I mean, where's the main solution? Is it educating fellow parents? Is it going after government bodies? Is it going after corporations? What's the best way to go about this?
I think it's all of the above. I see this like a Jenga tower, it's about where we pull the pieces out, and it's going to require all of us to do all of the work we're doing. So if it's working with parents, if it's speaking with schools, if it's doing policy work, we need people testifying at board meetings and, state legislature, we need federal pressure, we need laws to change, we need schools to think a lot more thoughtfully about their use of technology in the classroom. We need parents to be better educated and informed. All of that. And I feel a sense of urgency today that I didn't feel a few years ago. And so, I want this to be an inclusive experience. Come as you are, fight for what you believe in whatever those Jenga pieces are, if that, whatever your skill and your skill set and talent is, but it's all of the above is what I would say.
Yeah. And I completely agree. When I started Better Screen Time, I really initially felt this was a parent problem. I was totally sold on that idea. The first maybe year or two of me sharing things at Better Screen Time was very parent focused, very family focused. And I still believe that the family is the core of society, and that's really, as parents, where we will make the most difference. But on a whole level, as time passed, I would meet parents who had lost their children who had committed suicide due to cyberbullying or fentanyl, overdose, or, getting drugs through Snapchat unknowingly, not knowing that the painkillers they were getting were laced with fentanyl. And I started talking to these parents, and they looked just like me. They looked just like you. These were regular parents who cared about their kids, who were not absent from their kids' lives. And that was the moment that I realized that this is not just a parent problem. There are some really big companies with a lot of money who really want to get young users addicted at a young age because it helps their bottom line. They make money. They're creating an addictive product. And then I realized that, well, the only way these tech companies will be reined in is through some government regulation. And so I was like, we got to have the government. And then as I started working with my local school district, I could see that, my kids are spending almost 7 hours a day there. So as a parent, I only have influence over these other hours. So therefore, the school has a huge responsibility. And so just like Emily said, but I didn't come to that conclusion until a couple of years in. And then as I've worked with more and more parents, and I've spoken to more, with people who work in government or other things, and actually talked to lobbyists who work for big tech companies, I've realized, oh, wow, this is going to take all of us to save our kids, truthfully.
Agreed.
So let me find a way to kind of disagree with you guys, because, and the way I see it, having been very politically and social justice active for many, many years, for the last, I'd say 20 years, one of the challenges with these types of things is that when you say all the above, or it's everything, it's really hard to move forward. And so if we look at just politics in general, like, if you look at, there's so many different issues with politics, education, healthcare, all the different things that people talk about, gerrymandering, all these different things. So the climate, inclusion, like there's so many different challenges people have. And what ends up happening is when you're overwhelmed with so many things, it's really hard to move forward or pick the one thing. And so, if I had to pick one thing in like the political social justice space, it would be money. If you take out the money out of politics, or at least limit it, it would have significant impact on the other things. And when I think about this issue, to me, it's the parents. It doesn't mean to ignore the other stuff. I'd say it's 80-20. You focus on the parents and educate them and all that, because if you do educate them, and you talk about the issues, and you talk about the solutions, you talk about what needs to happen, they will then start advocating the school board. They will start advocating to their local, local governments, or think of this federally, and lobby groups and all that kind of stuff. So I think for me, that's kind of where my head's at. I think that, so few parents, and like I said, I'm part of the 0.01% that's done this with my kids. That means most don't. We have to educate them and try to get to some sort of critical mass of 5, 10, or 20% that think this is a big deal. Just like in the early days of climate change, most people didn't care, and then there became some critical mass. So that's kind of my take. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Let me challenge you on that, because to me, that the assumption that this is a parent problem, and again, I will be very clear, this is a parenting challenge. It is not our fault. It is our responsibility. That's a little bit of a nuance there. The tech industry would very much love to hear you say that, because if you make this a parenting problem, they don't have to do anything. They could make their product safer. They could design social media to not have harmful content be fed into algorithms to target young teens. They choose not to. It's deliberate. And so, it's a little bit like telling, I think about the parents Andrea's talking about that we know who've lost children, who were like us, who did everything right, who limited screen time, and this still happened. I don't think you could look in their eyes and tell them this was your fault or this is your responsibility. So again, I think that's a convenient answer for what we get fed from the tech industry about it is, again, they would much prefer it be our fault rather than their responsibility.
I guess what I'm saying is that I'm trying to fire up the parents, because I think they don't have the knowledge, they don't know what's going on. I'm trying to get them fired up
Totally agree.
Fight everything. That's kind of what I'm not saying. It's a blame,
fair.
like, because most of them don't know. It's like, guys, let the data. Come on, like, let's do this. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Agree. And to your point about the money too, you know, I think again that we have to look at who has a vested interest in getting these products to be used, whether it's by us or by our children. And so, you know, that to me is absolutely the first place I start anytime anybody reaches out to me is I look at their website and I go to their funding source. I go to their partners and I look and see, you know, the National PTA is funded by Discord, for example, right? That is a conflict of interest, in my opinion. So again, I think you're right. And I think we have to be really careful about not giving the tech industry what they want in terms of assigning blame.
No, I agree. No, I'm definitely not. I'm very anti-corporation and definitely want to fight the tech industries and the tech bros for sure. Andrew, what do you want to share?
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, truthfully, just agree with you both. How I see it is almost just like a series of dominoes, right? But that first domino is the parents. And so nothing will change if as parents, we don't speak up to our school board, or we don't, you know, send that letter to Google and say, hey, you didn't ask for my permission to give my child access to AI. I didn't really want that. And so it is the voice of parents, and really at the end of the day, the biggest difference we will all make is within the walls of our own home. And so it's just, you know, helping your kids, even though when they feel like they're the only one, again, like Emily said, emphasizing those values. But as parents, it truthfully, the buck stops with us, that's for sure. And that's really how this change is going to happen, is by us speaking up.
So how do we deal with families? So just to play devil's advocate here, a family that has zero tech, birth to 5, nothing. Parents don't have smartphones. Kid goes to kindergarten, gets an iPad at kindergarten, given to them by the school, uses YouTube on their device, encounters porn. How is that a parenting? That's not a parenting thing, right? Like that is a school problem. And again, you could raise that 0 to 5 years. You could be talking about values. You could be, that child might know when I encountered the porn, what to do, right? That's a skill that we could teach them before they have it. But that to me is where, you know, the responsibility piece of this is yes, it's parents. And we have to recognize there are parents that are saying no, are restricting, are limiting, and the school is giving it to them. Or they're on the bus and their friends are showing it to them, right? So again, yes, we need more parent involvement, and we need to hold back or push back on the school.
Yeah, and I think that if you're part of those parents like us, the 0.1% that is, you know, not having tech when the kids are little, and we find out that they're given an iPad, we would be on them very, very fast, and probably trying to advocate the other parents that, hey, we shouldn't have iPads for our 5-year-olds. So I want to, and again, I'm a big believer in trying to convince parents. So I want to share some data, okay? Because we share data about the adults, but let's talk about the data for the kids. So teens spend on average 8.5 hours daily on screens outside of educational purposes. Tweens 8 to 12 average of 5.5 hours per day. Over 50% of U.S. teens 12 to 7 report 4+ hours of daily screen time, which exceeds recommended limits. Teens with 4+ hours daily screen time are twice likely to experience anxiety, 27%, and depression, 25.9%. Adolescents spending more than 3 hours daily on social media face double the risk of mental health problems, including depression and anxiety. 46% of teens aged 13 to 17 report that social media negatively affects their body image. Increased screen time is associated with delayed bedtimes and reduced sleep duration. 56% of parents believe electronic, social media, and cell phones are to blame for their child's sleep issue. I'm not sure what they're doing about it. There's also a physical health issue with vision problems. There's an increase in obesity risk. 11% of adolescents exhibit problematic social media behavior, including addictive behaviors. Cyberbullying is also a very, very huge concern, and it's growing and you've talked about this. There's people who have become suicidal. I know there's a woman on LinkedIn who talks about her son, committing suicide. And so all that data is really, really scary in so many different areas. And so that's why I want parents to really realize there's so much going on here. And these are like snapshots, and then you don't even know what it means long term. Like you can say, well, my kid's fine, but then what happens a year later, or 3 years into this, or 5 years into this? And so, yeah, I mean, in terms of the data that I just shared, are any of those pieces ones that really speak to you? I would love to hear your thoughts.
Go ahead, Emily.
I mean, again, hours in the day. Like, you said 8.5. I'd heard 7.5 for that 8 to 18-year-old set. But like, regardless, that's a third of the day, and the other third we should be sleeping. And Doug Gentile has done some great research on displacement. Right, the time that we spend on screens is displacing time or time we would have spent historically doing other things like reading and being with friends and being outside, sleeping. And so, to me, it's just simply an input output in that sense. It's like, if we have 24 hours in a day and we should be sleeping 8 of them, what do we do with the rest of them? And if half of those are in school, address the fact that a lot of those school hours are also on screens. Again, I think I really want more parent action. Like I'm hearing that in the conversation too, about the responsibility, and it does need to be in the home. I also am just so shocked by the amount of pressure put on teachers and schools and parents to use tech tools to solve problems tech created. I think that's another thing that makes this even harder. You're sort of battling on multiple fronts. And so I just, it feels exhausting. It feels overwhelming. And I think parents just do toss up their hands and say, I don't even know where to start with this. Like, this is just too overwhelming. And I have a problem too. I'm addicted, or I'm doom scrolling. So, again, I just go back to like having to start with where you are. What is a low hanging fruit for you? Like our simple family rule, and we don't have many, for better or worse, is no phones in the bedroom, period. And that's been the rule for years. So my husband, me, and my son, who has a phone, and my daughter does not, by the way, she's 14, and we share my phone. All of those devices stay in the living room. That's just a non-negotiable. And I think that's maybe a starting point as an adult, is like, put your phone in the living room or out of the bedroom, or even on the other side of the bedroom door. It's like baby steps, but nothing's going to change if we're not willing to sort of chip away at it in different places.
Totally. Yeah. And we have the same boundary in our home, and like, I'll never look back of removing my phone from my bedroom. And it's given me so much rejuvenation, relationships, rest. And I think that's a great boundary we can have. So I think, back to your data points, Bobby and Emily addressed time. Then I think the other big thing that we have to address, obviously, is content. And so you mentioned stats about cyberbullying or body image, and then we've got self-harm. And so not only are these platforms addicting and keeping our kids from doing the things that would help them develop properly and the way that they should, but they're also being exposed to violence and to pornography and to cyberbullying and a lot of things that most of us probably were not exposed to at their age. And so how do we help them just develop and properly and have those values that are going to help carry them through? And the phrase I always use, which comes from my oldest from her college essay, is just to know who they are. And we want them to know who they are before social media and all of these other things tell them, because they're in such a, Emily and I both taught junior high, right? You taught junior high, Emily. I only taught for a year, so I didn't spend as much time in the classroom as Emily, but I've had a lot of volunteer opportunities since then with adolescents. And it's such a special time. It's such a time when they really are figuring out who they are, and they're developing skills, and their brain's going through this pruning process where it's trying to decide what to hang on to and what to let go of. And so the way they spend their time really does matter, but also the kind of content that they're exposed to really matters. It changes and shapes their view of the world and their view of themselves. And we want them to know who they are without those loud voices.
Yeah, I think when I look at all the data, again, it's overwhelming. And the one that kind of strikes me most is just the mental exhaustion piece, because it affects, there's just so much mental challenges around. That's what the cyberbullying is. That's what you're dealing with, adult sites, dealing with accessibility. I mean, and I'll fully acknowledge that, I feel bad if we have not, I wanted to have the kids not have laptops in the rooms. I wanted the kids to not have their phones in the room. They have flip phones, but the flip phones are still in their rooms, and I wish I could ban it. And I admit that I've done a good job. Like I'm my daughter is 14, and can be very, very stubborn and scary, and it's just really, really hard because she's done things to us like I'm not going to eat, or I'm don't talk to us for 3 days, or they take off and they don't come home from school, and I'm like, where are you? And it freaks me out as a parent, and I don't know how to deal with that. So I'm making certain sacrifices and trying to figure it out, and accommodations, giving some grace. But I find it really, really hard. It's one of the hardest things for me to deal with. But the thing that even though my kids have flip phones, I think a big challenge is that with laptops and with flip phones, there is still 24/7 access to them. Yeah. So their friends are texting them, they're Google chatting them on their laptops, and they're just having conversations all the time. And my son's on Discord, and it's crazy. Like you can't get away from it. And so, the mindfulness piece is always missing, right? It'd be nice to just actually, have, the kids come home and just maybe just chill, read a book, or do drawings, or let's talk, or whatever, or even dinner time. Like let's just put away our devices and all that kind of stuff. So I think that it's also really challenging for teens. So I kind of wanted to ask you about that. Any tips on dealing with teens? So I have a 14-year-old, 16-year-old, and like I said, I've told my son he'll get a smartphone in grade 12. So he'll have a year to integrate it, teach him how to do it, how to leverage it, and then hopefully be set up for life better. And the same with my daughter, but it's still a big struggle because there's still this 24/7 access. So I'd love to get some insights from you dealing with teenagers, because it's very personally relevant to me. So
yeah. Well, I think when we're feeling overwhelmed and stuck, one of the best things to do is just to create some screen-free family rituals, is what I call them. And I think as parents, we know what the ideal is. The ideal is no screens in the bedroom, and it's, no social media till 16, and it's all the things. And I think sometimes if parents are feeling like, oh, that's so far removed from where we're at, then they just give up. But I think we can baby step into it. And one of those best things is creating some screen-free family rituals. So what do I mean by that? That can be something like device-free dinner. So just sitting down together as a family and deciding ahead of time, not in the moment, because that's when things get dicey, but deciding ahead of time on a Sunday night when everyone's well rested and you've maybe had some time to connect, just saying, I really feel like we should put all devices away during dinner and just have some good conversation for 30 minutes. Do you guys think we could do that? Do you think we could all put our devices in the charging station or wherever, have some home for your phone, I call it, but someplace, and let's focus on some good conversation time for 30 minutes every night, or maybe it's just 2 nights a week, because everybody's schedules might vary. And I feel like that is an easy way to step into it and get some buy-in from teenagers before we're maybe trying to overhaul everything. And then as you work into that ritual, then start to talk about the benefits that you're seeing, because you will see benefits if you stick with it. And ask your teens in a couple of weeks, like, have you guys enjoyed our dinners? Like, and they might shrug their shoulders and roll their eyes, but you can come up with something and say, I feel more connected to everyone. I feel like I know more of what's going on. And then at that point, you can introduce, like, maybe what's another baby step that you could take, where maybe then we're going on a walk as a family after dinner, and we're actually all leaving our phones at home, and then we're just getting practice at being away from a device, which is really good for teenagers. It's really good for them to get practice at being away from their device, and they will find that it gets easier and they will start to see the benefits. And it doesn't always come right away, because that's normal for teenagers to push back. That's just the stage of development they're in, and that's totally normal. But we still have to parent, and we still have to help them create those boundaries. So I think just taking it slowly is really helpful with teens. Those are my thoughts.
I agree. And I would just add, I mean, Andrea saying this, it's just at the core of it, it's about the relationship you have. It's not about the screen. It's not about, the rules. You can't have those conversations if your relationship to your kid isn't not without strain, but is strong. It is normal for teens to rebel and not like and to eye roll, and all of that's normal. And we have to ignore a lot of that. But, I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, and, it's like, my 17-year-old and I butt heads a lot, and he has a phone now and he does play video games, and I've had a lot of conversations with him about it. And that's been, sometimes it's a tension point. And at some point I decided I had to pick my battles about what he was doing. And again, it's that balance of like helping him become a young adult, making his own decisions. And so like one thing that we like to do together is build Legos. So like every now and then, he'll buy a Lego set and he'll bring it home and he'll be like, Mom, you want to do Legos? And I will say yes. So it's like whatever those little moments of connection, maybe it's, go to Starbucks together, and just to build from the ones that you already have. And sometimes, and I say this is going backward to go forward, it's like, it might be you sit and watch that YouTuber with your teenager as much as you might hate it inside, to see what they're interested in. And then that's an opportunity for connection. That is sometimes the starting point.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And I love those suggestions. I want to talk briefly about tech. We're about to end soon, but I want to talk briefly about technology to deal with this. So, in the early days, I was using Microsoft Family Safety, but it was really not very effective. And the one that I use now is called Custodio. And what it does is it can track their phones. Now I have no control of their flip phones. So that's the one drawback, but I do control their laptops. It can turn off at 10 p.m. or 12 p.m. It can limit time at various times of the day where they don't have access to the phone or their laptop. It can see exactly what they're doing, what they're searching, all the different things. I can block different apps on it. So that to me has been really, really powerful. I've let the kids know what the expectation and how that'll. They obviously hate it, of course, but that's kind of what I've been using. It's a very, very effective tool, not for flip phones, sadly, but for smartphones and for laptops. And even screen time. And also I also control the Wi-Fi. So basically they can't watch YouTube later because we're going to bed now like at 11. The kids are up, right? So the Wi-Fi shuts off at a certain point, and then they can only maybe just watch television if they want to. And that's fine, but that's a tool I've been using that I really do like. It's called Custodio with a Q. Do you guys use any sort of technology or tools like that?
Yeah, I can share. So we use the Griffin router, and we do like those parental controls from the router level because that is kind of commanding everything in the house. We use it very simply. It turns off our Wi-Fi at 10:30 at night. That signals the bedtime. And then it does have just some basic filters in place. And then my second oldest, who's also 17, she has a simplified iPhone. And so I do use screen time on that. And I use those tools with the caveat of knowing that no tool is 100% effective and isn't always going to work. And I think different parents rely on different tools based on where they're at, like how much tech they use in their home. But the thing that I always tell parents is just remember, don't let it give you a false sense of security, because the challenge that sometimes people run into is they think, oh, I've got all these things set up to protect my kid, but they forget that it requires quite a bit of maintenance to keep those things going. And so if you are using any kind of tool, Custodio or whatever, just remember that it is a tool that requires maintenance. And also, like you said, it requires transparency between you and your child and them knowing that you are using these tools. And again, using kind of your family tech plan as that core foundation. And then if you're using any tech to help you manage the tech, that's just kind of an extra layer that might help out. So
yeah, one thing that's interesting is that my son, Roblox, I can't block it. He has talked to his friends on Discord and they found ways around it. It's amazing how smart they are.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah, they are.
Which is, I probably have a less popular opinion here, which is that I don't recommend any of these things because for the reason that kids always find the workaround, for the reason that it's using tech to solve a problem tech created, for the reason that it too often parents use it as the solution and forget the whole parenting part of it. And that I agree with Andrea for the most part. Like, I really think it's like only a tool. And I'll say to families, like, look, if you have something you use and it, it seems to be effective and you're doing the parenting part, fine, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But, I think the other part that's not talked about a lot with these tools is the surveillance component. And, there's a fine line between supervision and surveillance. And I think that there is a really important conversation, and that some families use it as a surveillance tool. Some families use it as a supervision tool. And that is a conversation that has to be had, because you will violate any trust you have with your child if you're surveilling them without their knowledge. And so, again, nothing's private on the internet, and that's a lesson we've got to teach our kids from day one. But, if we're surveilling them, I think that surveillance erodes trust, and that's a really risky thing as well. So, again, with a little asterisk, I'll say I don't recommend them, but if there's something that's working for you, and I encourage families to do their homework when they look at these as tools, because a lot of them are also problematic business models as well, or again, give parents actually a different sense of anxiety than reassurance. And so again, there's a lot of nuance to this, and yeah. That's what I would
Sorry, quick question though. So does that mean, like, if they have a phone or a laptop, or let's say a phone, is it private? And does that mean that you don't have their passwords, you don't get access to their chats, or
well, so my son, I do know his password. I don't really look at his phone. I tell him I can, and he knows. Right. And nothing's private. I mean, this is the problem. It's like that we just have these conversations all the time. I'm like, don't send any nude pictures. And if you receive one, here's what you do. I mean, literally, I'm that parent that is constantly, I call it drive-by parenting. It's just like little short bursts of conversation always. It's interesting because you're talking about laptops, and I'm assuming that those are personal laptops, because one of the biggest challenges with the school issued ones is you can't add parental controls. You can't download your own thing. They're very heavily regulated by the school, which is also part of the problem, right? Like, some parents want more control over what's coming in and out. So, the rule for my son is that the phone has to stay upstairs. So it's just not in his room at night. And yeah, I'm sure I miss stuff. And the reality is I am focusing on the relationship I have with him, so that when he encounters stuff, he will tell us. And I say when, because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Sure.
And that's my approach. It's not going to work for everybody. My daughter, because we share a phone, she has access to an iPad that has the iMessage, it's like her texts appear on my phone. And so let me tell you, 99.9% of them are inane and totally just like, 14-year-old socializing. But she knows I see them, and it opens opportunities for conversation. It also means she can see my texts when they come up. So like, it makes me think more about what I'm putting in writing. And that's an accountability piece that, it's not perfect. Like Andrea said, there's no tool is a single perfect solution, but yeah, that's how we do it. But we don't use screen time limits on the phones, and we just put the phones upstairs at night.
And Andrea, what's your take on that in terms of, they have the privilege of having the phone, but we have access to it if we needed to? And so
I definitely am in agreement with that. I probably do a little more checking than Emily. Again, I've got 5 kids, so I just have a little more that I've got to stay on top of. And not comparing, but it's just like, I can't do that alone personally. That's why I do need to use a little bit of tech, but we do what we call tech checks. And so I'll just ask my teen, hey, let's do a tech check. And I'll actually, just with her in the room, I'll do a quick, looking at her texts, looking at different things, but I'm not sitting there spying, if that makes sense. My intent isn't to try to catch her doing something bad. My intent is just I'm going to do a quick check for anything that might cause a red flag to go off in my head. And my kids just know that that's part of the deal. That's part of the privilege of having a device. And then and it can be helpful to just be like, oh, I didn't know about, that this friend was going through this, and maybe a quick little conversation, but I'm also not digging and I'm not prying. But I think it's healthy for them. And like Emily said, we know that everything that's online is it's not private. So we have that conversation a lot too.
Well, I love the concept of supervision versus surveillance, which I thought was really cool with Emily. Thank you so much for your time. This has been an amazing conversation. I would love for you guys to kind of share a bit about how people can follow you, support your business, what programs you offer. So Emily, let's start with you. And then
Sure. Well, thank you. Yes, I wrote a book called The Screen Time Solution, Becoming a Tech Intentional, or a Judgment-Free Guide to Becoming a Tech Intentional Family. That's definitely towards families and parenting. But a lot of the work I do now is around screen use in schools. And so I write essays every week. So I have a mailing list. You can go to my website at thescreentimeconsultant.com. And just last week, I launched my new membership portal, which is just being tested, but it's called the Time Collective, and that stands for the Tech Intentional Movement for Education. And the idea is it's a clearinghouse for letter templates and resources and fact sheets and access to experts and webinars and office hours with me. And we're building out a map so you can find other people in your community who are also fighting for tech intentionality in schools. And it's actually for parents, educators, and school leaders. I want it to be an inclusive place where courageous school leaders can come and get support as well. And then I do more bespoke consulting services with schools to help them build out a tech intentional framework with the idea that, prioritizing child development and, good teaching practices over technology. So that's where you can find me. And yes, on the socials, of course, I ironically am there.
Yeah, I just have to say, Emily does a great job with, just all of the things related to education and technology. So she is a really great resource if you're looking for some help on that, and parenting as well.
Thank you.
I
love fest here, guys. I love it.
It's nice to have fellow advocates and not so we don't all feel so alone. So
exactly.
So yes, you can find us at betterscreentime.com. Every once in a while, my husband jumps in and helps out with some things. He's a software engineer, works on infrared cameras. So he's always helpful when it comes to when parents have all the tech questions. And he's definitely in line with this, parenting is the best line of defense, because he understands all of the loopholes that he could easily get around as a teenager. And so he knows how that goes. So he helps out once in a while, but it's primarily me. I have what I call a discussion guide, because it's definitely nothing as hefty as what Emily's got. But this is just a simple discussion guide. It's called Creating a Tech Healthy Family. And it's 10 must-have conversations to help you worry less and connect more with your kids. It's just 10 conversations to go through with your kids, make your family tech plan, talk about those tricky things like pornography and all the things. Then we have a membership called the Tech Healthy Family Hub. And I have both of our courses in there. One is called Creating a Tech Healthy Family, and the other is Untangling Teens in Tech. And then we have live monthly masterclasses, and you can find all of that at betterscreentime.com. And I'm primarily on Instagram at betterscreentime.
I want to thank you both for your advocacy and for activism. I mean, educating parents, going after tech companies, going after policymakers to try to advocate, going after school boards to try to advocate for change and positive. It means a lot to me. I think that this issue is so close to my heart. It's been hard. I can honestly say that I got emotional talking to you guys, hearing what you had to say. I think I worry that's negatively impacted my relationship with my children, right? And I don't know what it's going to be like. I think, we could have been better and more closer if we didn't have so much tech in our lives. And I was able to set more better boundaries. And, we don't have enough dinners together. We don't spend evenings together. We don't go for walks. And, it just really hits me hard. And that's why, and it's also very lonely, because so few people get what I'm talking about, and you hear it so well, and you're doing things that I hadn't even thought about, which I do appreciate. So thank you so much for that. I want to make it clear that follow these people, follow their work, advocate, tell other parents, other tech people, other companies, other policymakers, whatever, what they're doing, because I think this is going to be one of the biggest conversations of our lives. And so
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here for that. And then
Thank
finally, this is available on a live stream everywhere. So this will be on YouTube, it's on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, like it's everywhere. And so you can watch this replay. If you have questions, tag these people and ask questions. This is brought to you by the TLB Club. Thought Leaders Brand Club is my membership community where I help small business owners level up their game in terms of marketing, sales, branding, programs, thought leadership, content strategy, whatever they need help with, because it's very lonely out there as an entrepreneur. We're overwhelmed with tools and resources. We want a place to ask questions to get support to grow, and also helps people who are looking for jobs or leadership development advocates. We have weekly guest expert speakers, which I'm hoping to bring you guys in to talk to our group. We also have a Library 200 masterclass we've done already with some amazing thought leaders from around the world. We have weekly coaching calls. We have a private WhatsApp group, a private LinkedIn group where we ask questions, share resources, give feedback on things. And it's just a really amazing community of myself who leads it, but also the other people who are there with their own expertise. So click the QR code there if you want to learn more about TLB Club. You can come by to one of our weekly Zoom calls anytime. We do this live stream every month with different experts, and I'm not sure what the next one's going to be about, but I want to thank Andrea Davis and Emily Churkin for your efforts and for what you're doing, for spending the time with me today. Check out the replay, guys, follow them, and thank you so much for coming by. Take care.
you, Bobby. Take care.
Bobby. Really
Thanks.
appreciate you.
Yeah, take care. Bye, Andrea.